Hey, Mr. Traeger here. Today we're going to be covering myth number three. So far, we've been working through a series of three myths when we talk about sexuality. And the third myth that we're going to talk about today has to do with how we show love. And so, myth number three is that becoming sexually intimate shows that a couple's really in love. And the idea here is sometimes people think that they prove love or they demonstrate or show that they love a person through having sex. So it'd be something like, I want to show you how much I love you. I want to prove to you. I want to prove to everybody. I want to show, you know, the world that I love you. And in that kind of weird sense, that if we have sex, it's proof. Like if you loved me, you would. You know, a lot of those kinds of things. And that's what this myth kind of talks about. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we express love in an effective way. So we want to talk about these things called love languages, and this came from an excerpt from a book by Gary Chapman called The Five Love Languages. And so I'm going to briefly summarize the concept of that book in terms of this idea of love languages. But first, I want to explain how men and women. I know this is a shock, but men and women are different. All right. Now, what research has found is that actually men and women's brain look differently. They function differently. They have different wiring. And I've got a state of the art slide here that's going to demonstrate and show the difference between the female brain and the male brain. So first of all, the female brain, if you look, I mean, there's some obvious things here. You know, the shopping lobe here. Let's get my mouse over here. The chocolate part, obviously binges and cravings, maternal urges and weddings, mystery moods and behaviors. I think this might be a little smaller than some, but we see some unique features in the female brain and the male brain. Obviously, we see the largest part here. We've got movies with explosions and babes. That's usually a big part of male culture. The lame excuses gland, the personal hygiene atom, and up here the TV remote control. So uh, obviously, you can see there's a lot of difference between men and women. Now, this is obviously not a scientific model, but it definitely does show some differences between how men and women think. So, in relationships, why would it be any different? That men and women come into a relationship with a different mindset of what love is. And it's important for us to understand where each person is coming from so that we can effectively communicate that to the other person. So, this is where the love languages come in. And kind of think of this as like learning a foreign language, for example. If I was in Mexico and I wanted to ask a local a question about, let's say, a restaurant to go eat at, the best way for me to communicate to that local would be to speak in a language that he understands. If he doesn't understand English very well, me talking louder isn't going to help. Me talking slower isn't going to help. I'm just going to be talking loud and slow in a language he doesn't understand. Okay. If I understand and know how to speak Spanish, I'm going to be able to communicate with him very clearly exactly what it is that I'm looking for, and he's going to be able to clearly explain back to me, where the best restaurant is to eat. Okay, love languages are pretty much the same kind of concept. We tend to communicate the same language, love language, as we interpret. All right, and that's what's important to understand is that how we communicate is also what we typically hear the clearest. All right, so let's go through the five right here. The first one, physical touch. And what physical touch is literally that. And it doesn't have to be, it does include sex, but it doesn't have to include only sex. This can be holding hands, this can be kissing, this can be a pat on the back, it can be a handshake, a fist bump, your arm around somebody, anything that would involve me physically touching a person. That releases endorphins, makes them feel good. Touch is a natural pain reliever. That's why little kids, when they get hurt, they want you to rub it, they want you to kiss on it. And that's what gives them some of that relief and some of that assurance that they're loved, that they're taken care of, and that's physical touch. All right. The second one is gifts, giving gifts. Now the gifts don't have to be purchased; they can be made, they can be created. Little kids love to do this. They make mom and dad little gifts. We get dandelions, we get rocks that are painted. Those are all gifts that kids give, and some people are very sensitive to that. That it's not only the gift, but it's the thought that goes into it, and it's the planning and the prep and the wrapping, the present. All those things go into it. And so that's another love language is giving or receiving gifts. Verbal. Verbal is using words. Using you can say the words, you can sing the words, you can write the words. It's using words to communicate love. So this can be in poems. This can be obviously saying I love you, I appreciate you. Compliments, words of affirmation. Hey, you're really good at this. I really love hanging out with you. You're super funny. You make me laugh all the time. All those are verbal affirmations. Those are ways to communicate love to a person. Then there's acts of service. Acts of service is pretty much just doing things for someone without the expectation of anything in return. So it's not a chore. It's not a responsibility. I mean, those are duties. Those are responsibilities that we have. An act of service is going above and beyond that. Something that we're not expected to do, but we're doing because we want to help out. Dad's had a stressful day at work, so you come home from school, and let's say he usually takes care of the lawn, so you just mow the lawn for him, so he doesn't have to worry about it that night. Or maybe for mom, it's doing folding the laundry. You come home, there's 2 laundry baskets of laundry. Mom's super busy with stuff going on, and so you just come home and say, yeah, I'll fold the laundry for you, Mom. Don't worry about it. Those kinds of things. That's what acts of service is. All right. And then lastly is time. And with time, it doesn't really matter what you do. The whole idea of time is simply spending time together. It could be mom hangs out with dad in the garage while he works on the car. She's not doing anything. She's just sitting out there talking to him. Maybe she's just sitting there, but they're spending time together. Maybe it's dad going to the shopping mall with mom and sitting there holding her purse while she tries on an outfit or something like that. It's not that he really wants to do that, but he wants to spend time with her, and that's kind of what she's doing. That's what time is. Okay, it's just doing things with the other person, right? Now, the trick to love languages is to figure out what love language or what primary love language that person is, and then you start communicating love that way. Now, some people would say, well, what if let's take gifts. Okay, gifts aren't that big of a deal to me. What's the big deal? Why should I have to give gifts to somebody to show that I love them? What's that going to prove? Okay. Well, the problem is that giving the gift isn't about you. It's about them. So let's go back to this definition that we've been working on with love. We've seen this slide before. Love means to give at the expense of self. It's doing what's in another person's best interest. So love is about who? It's about them. It's not about you. And so it doesn't matter what you receive doing it, how you feel doing it. What matters is how they feel when you do that. All right, and that's the huge trick into understanding this whole idea of love languages. And there's a lot of people out there. If they understood this, I think their marriages would be different. I think their relationships would be a ton different, because we would go into the relationship without thinking about what's in it for me or what am I getting out of it, versus I'm doing this because this is what they need. All right, and that's the key, is doing what somebody else needs and communicating in a language that they understand. All right, so the trick is to figure out what the person's love language is, and then you speak that language. Now, how can you do that? Well, you can ask them directly. Hey, what kind of love language do you have? What could I do for you that you would really appreciate? That's a way to directly ask. And secondly is to pay attention to what they do for you, because typically people will communicate love in the same way that they want it reciprocated, that they want it spoken back to them. So if you got that person in your family who always sends you a card for every kind of holiday, maybe that's verbal. Maybe you should think about sending them a birthday card. Maybe you should think about making sure they get a Christmas card every year. That's something that means a lot to them. If you've got, mom or dad always just wants to kind of hang out with you. She wants to come in your room and sit down and see what you're doing and just kind of be there. Well, maybe that's time. Maybe that can clue you in on saying, hey, mom is a time person, or dad wants help splitting wood, or dad needs help cleaning the garage out or changing the oil in the car. Well, maybe that's could be time, but it could also be acts of service. He wants some help with some things. So those are things to pay attention to. How do they communicate love to me? Now, the disclaimer here is making sure you're paying attention to how they communicate love with you. All right? Not so much how they communicate love, mom and dad communicate love with each other, because we communicate love in different ways with different people. All right? So the way mom and dad communicate love to each other may not be the same way that they communicate love with you. Now, they might. We want to pay attention to specifically how they communicate with you, all right, because it may be different. So those are some tips in terms of understanding this whole love language thing. And I would challenge you, figure out what a parent's love language is, speak that love language for a week, and see how your relationship changes. I can guarantee you, you will see some differences in just the mood of your house, the attitude of your parents towards you, maybe even get the benefit of some extra responsibilities or extra freedoms, I should say, or appreciation, some of those kinds of things. So a little challenge for you. Find out mom and dad's love language, start speaking that, see what happens. All right. The myth that we're talking about is a good way to prove that you love a person is to be sexually active. And the truth and actuality is that there are thousands of ways to effectively express love. When you think about it, how many different ways can you give gifts to a person? How many different ways can you communicate love verbally? How many different ways can you do things like acts of service? You can do favors for people. How many ways can you use physical touch, not sexual touch, but other ways we can use physical touch to communicate love to a person. So when we look at how many different ways there are to communicate love, there's thousands of them. And to think that that one activity of sex is the only true way is really a complete, um, I guess, uh, I guess it completely underestimates what really is out there for you to communicate love to another person. All right, and so that brings us to the word of the day. The phrase of the day. The phrase of the day for today is to speak their language. That's the key. Focus on them and speak their language. So there's our phrase for the day. So based on these five love languages, you start to apply these, put these into your relationships. You'll be amazed at how these relationships change, and these are game changers. In my opinion, these are game changers in a marriage. So when you guys get to that point, I know it's a long way off for some of you, apply some of these factors, this whole love language concept, and I think you really reduce the chance that you're going to be dealing with some of the divorce. The divorce rate is 62%. I think love languages is a big reason why people are going into a marriage and they don't understand how to function in terms of what love is in that marriage. And this is one way that people are kind of messing things up. It's not that they're doing the wrong things; they're just not doing the right things. All right, and that's important to pay attention to. All right, so phrase of the day: speak their language. All right, so that's all I got for you today. We'll see you guys in class tomorrow. All right.